Good morning. Oh, that was rubbish. Morning. Thanks. It is lovely once more to be sharing with you. I feel really echoey. Is that me? Shall I just wait a minute? Am I a bit close to my face? Better? Tiff's like, nah, it's rubbish. My family tell me I've got a big foghorn voice, so I could probably just shout, to be fair. Shall I just carry on, Tiff, and you can work it out? Okie dokie. It is lovely to be with you all. It's lovely to see some new faces with us as well. If you don't know me, my name is Sarah. Now, last week, Chris kicked us off. We've been doing a very short, kind of 3-week mini-series looking at the topic of generosity. And so last week, Chris was sharing with you all about how we can use our talents, how we can use our gifting, the things that God has given us, how we can give away really generously what God has given to us in terms of our gifting. And so this week, we're going to move on, and as you can see on the screen, we're going to be looking at the subject of time, how we can be generous with our time, how we can give it away maybe, how we can use our time really well, and also what the Bible has to say about our time. Now, if you've been in Kings any length of time, maybe you're new here and you don't know this, but if you've been in Kings a little while, you will know that I love a 3-point sermon, and I love it even more when those 3 points all begin with the same letter. And so this week, we've got a chef's kiss of 3 words, and they all begin with the same letter. I just love it. Hold on to your seats. We're going to be looking at those in a little while. So when I was kind of thinking about this, I was thinking about time and what that kind of looks like. And we're a little over halfway into January, aren't we? And time is a really funny thing because sometimes it feels like time goes super fast and it just flies in. And sometimes it feels really slow. And so, am I good? Yeah. I'm going to give you a little timeline of my last few weeks, and I'm sure you will appreciate my point. So this is a timeline of my life for the last 3 weeks in some memes, and you're going to love this. So this is November the 1st. All is fine. I've got ages. Procrastinators unite. Tomorrow. That is my mantra sometimes, I think. But it's fine. It's November the 1st. It was ages. Christmas got ages. Oh, ages and ages. We're all good. November the 14th comes along. We're still fine. Christmas is still ages away. It's not even time to put the tree up yet. And this is how I spent my time. Looking at my to-do list. Actually doing the things on my to-do list. It was tiny. But we're all good because Christmas is ages away. Then we get into December the 13th. I review the list. It's not looking good. This list is looking quite long, and I have done very little off my list of tasks. December the 14th, realization kicks in. Here we are. That was me on December the 14th. Stages of Christmas shopping, plenty of time. Not plenty of time at all. December the 15th, it all begins, and this is what happens. It's beginning to cost a lot, like Christmas. And then Christmas Eve comes. It's all done, but who hates the wrapping? Oh, the wrapping. I did see someone wrap stuff for Christmas in tinfoil. I think I might go with that next year, but this was me on Christmas Eve. I never leave wrapping till Christmas Eve, but this year I was still wrapping on Christmas Eve. You people don't deserve bows. Absolutely not. And then Christmas Day appears. This is an actual photo of me on Christmas Day. Here we go. It's not looking particularly good, is it? So Christmas comes, Christmas goes. We come into January. Snow? Are you serious? Are you serious? January the 6th, the kids are going back to school and the teachers are celebrating because they basically got a snow day. And it leads us to today. Here we are. Who can feel this? Does it not feel like January the 74th? Well, seriously, how long is January? It goes on and on and on, doesn't it? And we're only in, what was it, the 19th or something today? Just bonkers. Time, it's a funny old thing, isn't it? So we've got some numbers for you. 365, what's 365? Days in a year. 168. Oh, not so many in that. 168. Tom, thank you, Tom. 168 hours in a week. 1,440 minutes in a day, I think that is. And 86,400 is how many seconds we all have every day. Hours, minutes, days. They just simply mark a passage of time, don't they? And it's the one thing that everybody sitting in here, actually everybody in the world has, that is exactly the same for each and every one of us. 24 hours in a day. And so, given that we all have the same amount, I just wonder why it's so stressful, why it causes so much stress, why I'm maybe always saying, I haven't got time, I'm too busy, I can't manage. Maybe it's stressful because once it's gone, it's gone. There's no reclaiming it back, there's no refunds, there's no returns. And so, with that in mind, given all of that chat, this morning we are going to be exploring a little bit of how we can be really generous with the time that we have, when on the face of it, our lives can feel like we can't accommodate one more single thing. Now, if you know me, maybe you might be sitting there this morning going, oh, here she goes. Sarah's off, she's going to tell us off, she's going to tell us we need to be doing more. Get on with it, get moving, get doing loads of things. And you know, you might be thinking she's going to be saying, I need to serve more, I need to give more, blah, 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 blah. All of that jazz. That's maybe what you're sitting thinking. And if I'm honest, you're possibly going to be a little bit wrong. That is not the point this morning of what I'm about to say. I think that, I was going to say in this country, but I think maybe globally, we have a bit of a weird obsession with time and with activity. These days, we have this glorification of busy. Because who said that over this last 6 weeks? How are you getting on? Oh, yeah, I'm all right, but I'm so busy. We all do it, don't we? And I wonder if busy has become a bit of a status symbol. It's a bit of a look at me, look at how important I am, look at all the things that I need to do, look at how needed I am to my family, my friends, whatever. And we kind of get into this rat race that becomes all-consuming, and it seems to offer a payoff in the future, but in reality, that future never comes because we keep on. That finish line keeps moving further away with the things that we have to do. And I talk about social media a lot, I think, when I speak, but I think social media, it plays into this ideology. It says resting is for the weak. Headlines like 24 million things that you should be cleaning when you're not. You know, are you cleaning the seal around your fridge? Not really, no, but maybe I should be. You know, it's like batch cook all the meals for the entire year in one Sunday afternoon. Don't buy your kids Play-Doh, make it from scratch. Maybe this one, maybe 15 ways to eat more kale. Not sure about that. I think that society has done this really good job on us in ensuring that our plates are full and that we should keep them spinning constantly all the time. But the fact is this, that you are in charge of the hours in your day. You are in charge about how you use your time. And I think that we can learn a whole heap about how we use our time well as followers of Jesus when we look to his life and what he did. Because the fact is this, Jesus knew a whole heap. Oh, do you know what? I think I've missed the kale picture. I have to show you this because it made me laugh. Can you read it? Pro tip, stir coconut oil into your kale. It makes it easier to scoop it into the trash. But yeah, Jesus knew about priorities. He understood about his priorities. He knew how to be this extravagant giver of his time, of his energy, without burning himself out. And although in his years of ministry, if you read through the Gospels, you'll see that Jesus did prioritize people regularly. He gave his time to people. We'll talk about that in a little while. But in reality, there was a whole bunch of times where he demonstrated his actual first priority, which was spending time with the Father. And so we've got a whole heap of scriptures that I just want to read just a few lines of. Mark 1, verse 35 says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, he left the house, and he went off to a solitary place where he prayed. And Simon and his companions went looking for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everybody is looking for you." Does it feel like that for you sometimes? Everybody is looking for you. Maybe if you've got young kids at home, you feel that maybe a little bit more. And so no wonder he went off to a quiet, solitary place. Mark 1, verse 45 says, Jesus went up onto a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. Luke 5, 15, 16. Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that the crowds of people came to hear him, and he healed their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places, and he prayed. And a couple more, Mark 6, 30 to 32. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. That feels like that would have been a bit much as well at that moment. But then, because so many people were coming and going that they didn't even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." And so they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. And then Jesus walks on the water. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get in the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida, where he dismissed the crowd. And after leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. And then finally, Mark 14. Oh, sorry, I haven't skipped you on. Here we go. Well, they went to a place called Gethsemane. Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." Jesus only wanted to do the will of his Father. So he was equal in deity. He was God. Jesus, we know he was God. He was equal in terms of that, but submissive always to the Father in his humanity. And he knew that from that, if he was to accomplish the mission that he came for, he needed to hear so clearly. He needed to commune with the Father regularly. This for Jesus was a non-negotiable. It wasn't an afterthought or "oh, I'll maybe do that later." This was a priority. I believe it was his first priority. And so those examples, they're just a handful, and there's more. If you read through the Gospels, there's more. There's loads of times that show that Jesus was committed to prayer and spending time with the Father. And so the first of your 3-point, beginning with the same letter, sermon is this word, communion. Jesus communed with the Father. Now, I'm not talking specifically about bread and wine, although I would say that taking communion is a really important thing. It's not necessarily just something you have to do here once a month. We can be taking communion at home together with our families, a really big priority, but that's maybe not quite what we're talking about. But I'm talking about communing with God. Jesus communed with the Father. He was at one with the Father, listening, being still, being quiet, reading, worshiping. That word communion, it means the sharing or exchanging of intimate thoughts or feelings, especially on a mental or a spiritual level. So just that engagement with the Father that we see Jesus doing. He understood the importance of giving his first time, his best time to the Father. So he went early in the morning, often to that quiet place. And so it strikes me, and I know that I'm probably not alone in this, that how often do I do the opposite? How often is it that for prayer, for shutting ourselves away, is that an afterthought or sometimes even a last resort when things are getting tough? Perhaps even we say sometimes, "Oh, I just don't have time to pray. I don't have time to spend that time with God." And yet we wonder why we're burned out, why we're exhausted, why we feel the pressure, why we're struggling to manage our time. See, I think that Jesus gave us this example that is so clear when we look at it and we see all of these examples of Jesus doing these things. He gave us that example in order that we would look and we would do the same, that we would do the will of the Father, that we would spend time with him, to be directed. The fact is, we need to hear the voice of God, don't we? And we can only do that well when we offer our first priority of time to him. Jesus' kind of communion with the Father, it was paramount to his ministry and his mission, and he didn't forget it. Because John 5, it says this, it says, "Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees his Father doing. Because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all he does." The Father wants to show you. We've been singing it this morning, haven't we? That we are children of God. As a child of God, the Father wants to show you where to go, what to do, the people to speak to, the places that you need to give your time and attention. And so it stands to reason then, doesn't it, that if Jesus as the Son of God was about doing that, then as maturing believers, as people that say we are following hard after Jesus, we need to be doing the same. And that way to find out the Father's will and allowing the Father, giving him the time to show us what he is doing, as Jesus understood it, was to commune, to share those intimate thoughts and feelings, because that's what prayer is, that's what communion is. It's not a one-way thing. Either way, it's not us just blurting out all of our stuff or Jesus, the Father doing the same. It's that ebb and flow, that conversation, that sharing of intimate thoughts and ideas. And we can only do that if we intentionally give our time and our attention. I was in a Zoom this week with a friend of mine. She actually lives down in Southampton now, but she was in Edinburgh for a little while. And she reminded me of something. Can anybody remember? Can you remember Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin? Getting a few nods. Yeah, remember when they split up? It was a good number of years ago now. Can you remember the phrase that Gwyneth Paltrow used? Anybody remember? It was a bit weird. Gwyneth Paltrow said that her and Chris Martin were consciously uncoupling. Can you remember that? Consciously uncoupling. Weird. But it got me thinking when that phrase was mentioned, maybe what we need to be doing is the opposite. Maybe what we need to be doing is consciously coupling, consciously getting into that little couple with God, holding on fast to him first and foremost. And so I just want to encourage you this morning, because it maybe feels like I'm saying, you've got to be doing more. It's not about that. It's about that heart towards the Father. It's about that pouring out of ourselves towards him. So I just want to encourage you, if you haven't made any New Year's resolutions this year, maybe, it's a bit late maybe, but you're okay, because we're only on the 19th of January, aren't we? We're fine. It's just really consider how we spend our 24 hours a day, and to choose to spend our first fruit time. So that first fruits were this principle during the feasts, this way of giving to God the very best of our labor, the very best of ourselves. And I think it's a principle that we can apply when we're talking about our time with God. Give him your very best. Proverbs 3, I think I'm maybe miles on. I don't know if I've put these in the right place. Proverbs 3 verse 9, I don't know if you've got this on the screen. It says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops." You are a wealthy people. If you have 24 hours in a day and you expect to have another 24 hours tomorrow, we're a wealthy people. We can give of our very best to the Father. And so what we see in all those examples that I read earlier on with Jesus was he went away onto the mountainside and to boats and to solitary places to pray, yes. But he also showed us about rest. We see him sleeping, don't we, in the back of the boat as the storm rages on. We see him walking for a really long time. We see him eating a good meal, taking time with friends, and sitting and being with people. They are all vital for us to imitate in order that we live our lives where we're able to give to other people. Because it's the very purpose of the Sabbath. It was the very purpose of that command of, you need to be still. You can't keep going on and on and on. And we see this really brilliant example of Jesus resting. It's in John 4. And we know that Jesus was traveling and he goes to a well, it was Jacob's well, and he sits down because he wants a drink. He's thirsty, he's tired, he's been walking for ages. Because nobody has an unlimited capacity to keep going relentlessly. Even if you are an Iron Man, I'm definitely not part of the Ironman community. But even if you are, these people that do these crazy big runs and cycles and swims and all that, they can't keep going forever and ever and ever. They need to stop at some point because there's physical, psychological benefits to resting. Jesus modeled those for us too. And so one of the cool bits of that story when Jesus sits down at the well looking for a drink is that it led him into meeting the woman at the well. It led him to being at a place where maybe he wouldn't have been if he hadn't sat down and rested. And we know those kind of unexpected events that followed as he spoke to her and she encountered God for herself. I just love that little kind of segue into a different bit of that story. And then, yeah, I just like it. I'm sure if we were to have watched Jesus, kind of physically watched him, we would have seen that the time pressure on him was absolutely immense. I think he well understood his 3 years, those kind of short 3 years of his ministry. Yet Jesus was never in a hurry. He was never rushing on. And he regularly stopped what he was doing to bend down, to lean in to somebody, even if that wasn't necessarily on the way to the place he was going. And so there's loads of examples where Jesus stopped in his tracks, and especially for someone that was in distress, for someone who maybe was not so well or had ill health, or for the children, the last, the lost, and the least. And so your second C, I told you I'd missed off. Your second C is this. It's a C for compassion. Jesus had compassion on people. I've said before, haven't I? Jesus was this extravagant giver of his time to those that sought after, those that came to him with their needs, with their wants, with their concerns. And I think we live in this world where sometimes we see time as a thing to be managed, to be optimized, maybe even to be hoarded for ourselves and not given away. But I think that Jesus knew something about time, maybe that we need to catch up with. He knew that his time was not a commodity, it was a gift. And it was a gift that he offered over and over and over again to people who needed it. And so in Mark 10, we've got this story where Jesus encounters this bunch of kids. And what do the disciples do? You'll know the story. They, go away. Jesus is far too busy. He's got far too many other priorities for you to be bothering him. The disciples, they had places to go. They had people to see. And seemingly more important things to be doing with their time. Yet Jesus, he gets a bit cross, doesn't he, with them? And it says, when Jesus saw this, the behavior of the disciples, he was indignant. He said to them, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly, I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." And so I think, I've heard that preached on a number of times over my life, but something maybe I hadn't really thought of a huge amount was, yes, the response of Jesus towards the children and what that said to them, but I often think maybe of the adults who were a little bit rebuked there. And I think about that, what are the children seeing in that? What are the children seeing in terms of Jesus' priority? I think they saw that they, in that moment, were his priority. And I think they saw Jesus' heart towards them. They saw something in him towards them. And I think if I was one of those children, I would have remembered that for a very long time. And I wonder what the parents of those children saw. I wonder if what they saw was this man who they weren't quite sure maybe who he was. They were just working that out. But they saw a man draw their children to themselves. There's nothing more lovely than seeing other people love your kids. Do you know what I mean by that? That it just does something inside you, and then other people are drawing your kids. And this wasn't just any old person. This was Jesus. I wonder what they remembered going forward. I think they remembered compassion. I when I was thinking about this, I was remembering just the idea of other people loving your kids. Who's been on holiday in Europe? Greece or Cyprus, those kind of places. We went on holiday a few times when our kids were younger, and what I loved about going on holiday with our kids when they were little, one was when they behaved well in the restaurant, that was always a win, but also when the waiters and the waitresses loved on your kids. I remember going on holiday. Evie was about 18 months old, and Chris has mentioned this story because he's laughing because he knows what I'm going to say. This was the holiday where it rained for the entire week, worst holiday ever. And so we spent a huge amount of time in the hotel rather than being outside at the pool. It was terrible. But one really lovely thing was one of the waitresses in the restaurant took a shine to Evie. And so Evie would be there and she's bored because we've got nothing to do. We've been in this place for days on end and it's still pouring with rain. And she's sitting in the high chair, and she'd be crying or whatever. And the lady would come and she'd go, "Oh, Evie, why you cry? Why you cry?" And she just loved her. And it was just so precious to us in that moment. And I think it just resembles what Jesus was doing in that moment with the children. Come and sit with me. He gave his compassion, he gave his time, and it told a story all of its own. And like I say, heaps of examples. Let's see what we've got. Matthew 14, when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. There's another one. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. Do you ever think Jesus rolled his eyes sometimes? Do you know what I mean? And he's gone away. And he's like, "Oh, for goodness sake." But he didn't go with that rolling of the eyes and continue in that behavior. It says, when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and he healed their sick. He's gone to this private place and then he sees the people and his heart is overwhelmed with compassion, even though in this story they've interrupted his grief. Because the story literally what happened just before is that Jesus has been told that John the Baptist has been beheaded. So his person, one of his people, something terrible has happened to, and yet Jesus still had enough time, he still had enough energy to be compassionate with those people. I think that's a wow moment. And then, I've gone one step too far. Luke 10. And the story of the Good Samaritan, this whole parable is where Jesus lays out how to care for someone, going above and beyond cultural barriers, financial barriers, giving time, money, resource to someone in really great need. And it echoes what David wrote in Psalm 145, where it says, "The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and rich in love." The Lord is good to all. He has compassion on all that he's made. And just that kind of definition of that word compassion, it's a strong feeling of sympathy and sadness for the suffering of others, that wish, that desire to help people. And so what I kind of take from that is that compassion isn't just this feeling, it isn't just something we go, "Oh, that's nice." Actually, compassion should spur us into action. It should motivate us to move, to do something. And so I guess this is the bit this morning where I'm asking you guys, how are we using our time? Are we using it well? Are we more than just helping someone? Are we choosing to be present with people? To see them, to hear them? Actually, maybe there are times where we aren't even able to do anything physical. Not all circumstances are these Good Samaritan moments, but the sacrificial thing of sitting down beside someone, giving our time, perhaps when we could easily be doing something else, is this demonstration of Matthew 25. We've got it on the walls in action, where we offer something not just to the person, but we also offer something to Jesus. It's actually part of our worship. I read a story just while I was thinking about this, a story of Alexander the Great. Now, I am no historian, not by any long shot, so I had to use a little bit of Wikipedia for this. So I learned that Alexander the Great was born in 356 BC, and he earned his name because he never lost a battle. He was undefeated in his military endeavors, despite the fact that he was regularly outnumbered. Loads of times there was like 2, 3, 4 times the amount of people on the other side than there was. Yet Alexander the Great won all his battles. Now, if you read about him, maybe don't read the Wikipedia page, because his personal kind of stuff was left a bit to be desired. He was a bit dodgy. But there's a really interesting story of his generosity. And so this story is that apparently Alexander the Great was one day on his travels somewhere with his kind of entourage of people, and a beggar was on the roadside, and the beggar asked him for money. And this man, he was obviously really poor, he was homeless, he had nowhere to go, and he had no claim on Alexander. He didn't know him, he didn't even have the right to speak to him yet. What Alexander did was he threw him some gold coins. And the servant, the courtier that was with him, said, "That's quite generous." He said, copper coins would very adequately have met the beggar's need. Why did you give him gold? Why not just some copper coins? He would have fed himself quite happily with some 1s and 2s. And Alexander responded, and apparently it says in the story, it said, Alexander responded in royal fashion. Quite like that. He said, "Copper coins would suit the beggar's need, but gold coins suit Alexander's giving." Are we giving copper coins when actually we're called to give gold? Are we given something where we can just throw it away and we've got time there? Are we going over and above the need to throw gold coins? Because going above and beyond with our time, with our energy, it's this example of love in action. It's this example of going beyond a surface level charity that anybody could do and into the realm of sacrificial, time-consuming service, because that's the fact. Serving God, it requires of us our time, but you know what? That is central to our faith. And so your last final C in my little trio of C's is this. It's that Jesus was committed to others. Sacrificially giving of our time is a powerful way of putting the kingdom of God into action in our daily lives and the things that we do every day. And one of the things that I love about you lot, you motley crew, my family, is I hear stories of how you are generous people. You are a generous people with your money, with your time, with your gifts, with your resources. I see it. There's countless stories I could give you that we hear of folk that go over and above to give of yourselves for the sake of other people. It really is a beautiful thing. And what you do when you do that is you reflect the heart and the character of God. I nearly did 4 things beginning with C. I nearly did character of God, so it's a little added extra for you. You reflect his heart, you reflect his character. And what we see, again, when we look in the Gospels, we see Jesus pouring himself over and over and over again for people. Psalm 145 talks of God opening his hand to satisfy the hunger and the thirst of people, of giving of his resource for the benefit of folk. Philippians 2 verse 7 says this. It says, "Have this mind among yourselves," so for us all to have, "which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men." Sacrificial selflessness and commitment, that commitment to loving people, to giving when it hurts, when it might not be convenient, when it might mean that we step outside of our usual rhythm and routine, the things that we would ordinarily do. When we pour out ourselves, it demonstrates powerfully our love one for another. And also for those in our spheres of influences, those places that we go every day, day in and day out. And in turn, it practically demonstrates our commitment to being followers of Jesus and our commitment to preferring one another. To say, actually, I give something to you because I think that your time is more important than mine in this moment. I can give you something that I have and prefer you. And just that scripture came to mind just as I was writing that says, this is how people will know that we are disciples of Jesus, by our love one for another. In other words, people are watching. People are looking at us and watching how we live. They are watching how we interact with one another and with the people in the world. And if what we show them is self-serving, keeping everything for ourselves, never going the extra mile, what we do is we reflect the image of a God who looks like that. And that isn't the case, is it? But by giving our time, giving our energy, what we demonstrate is someone else is of worth, someone else has value. And Jesus did this. He did it time and time again. He was generous with what he had. And that word generous just being defined as showing a readiness to give more of something than is strictly necessary or expected. And so just as I kind of finish off this morning, as we go out into our daily lives this week, I just really hope that we'll be looking for ways that we can bless others with the most valuable thing that we have, the thing that we all have in equal measure. Let's be looking for ways to bless folk. Let's be praying for opportunities that we can give in abundance, our time, our energy. Let's be a people that demonstrate the generous heart and character of God. Because if he was generous, then so must we be. Thanks, folks.
Thank you to Sarah and for Peter and the band leading us this morning. Lots to think about that Sarah has challenged and brought to us this morning.